Last week, Pascal Siakam finally got traded to the Indiana Pacers, the team with currently one of the most efficient offenses in NBA history. One of the best transition players in the league by the numbers is now joining one of the best transition teams in the league by the numbers. Seems like a pretty solid pairing once they get clicking. Even though I'm not quite sure if this duo can possibly produce a championship in the near future, this move did make me very optimistic about Tyrese's tenure with Indiana and how they seem to be all in on maximizing his prime championship window. Tyrese Halliburton was a part of that pretty weird draft in 2020. That draft that took place in November during the COVID year, where the most known prospect, going back to his brother and his infamous dad, was Lamelo Ball. Lamelo was like a 6'7" Sean Livingston, Penny Hardaway type guard that was projected to be pretty much a bigger, better scoring version of his older brother Lonzo. His rookie year, he was pretty much like a media darling where everything he did got notoriety, the smallest thing. And he did show a lot of flashes of what he was drafted to be as this big guard who could run the break, create for himself and others, and possibly truly be a focal point of a young, promising Charlotte team. It looked like Michael Jordan finally got it right. The following season, they won 43 games, made the play-in tournament, and just missed the postseason. Everything looked great. But ever since then, although Lamelo has actually elevated his level of play, becoming a much better scorer and outside shooter throughout the years, the man, just like his brother, can't consistently stay healthy. Last year, Melo fractured his ankle on a non-contact play, which basically caused him to miss the rest of the year. This year, he came back and missed 20 games with that exact same ankle. We beat up on a lot of the old fragile stars like Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard, and even some younger stars like Zion. But do you know, since the beginning of last year, Zion has actually played more games than Lamelo Ball. I truly believe Melo has a fun game that seems like it should be easy to build around, but injuries in the Ball family seem to unfortunately be a trend where you can't fully see the potential. Today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. It's a brand new year, and Manscaped wants to make sure you're stepping into the new year feeling fresh, cleansed, and groomed in the more uncomfortable areas. Today, I want to talk about their brand new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. This includes their brand new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, which now has an updated trimmer blade and an interchangeable foil blade, and it even comes with a brand new LED light that flatters multiple different skin tones. Also in the package, you'll find their Weed Whacker 2.0 for your nose and your ear hairs, and it's waterproof, their Crop Soother and Preserver to keep you fresh and clean down there, and it comes with 2 free gifts. If you want the perfect all-around package really for any man, and you want it for 20% off plus free international shipping, click the link in my description box below or use my promo code SWISH at checkout. That's 20% off of your first order plus free international shipping only at manscaped.com. It's kind of crazy when I look at Anthony Edwards now and the persona we associate with him now versus how he was scouted and projected to kind of be like coming out of Georgia. Ant was on most mock drafts as the predominant #1 pick with comparisons to Dwayne Wade and Victor Oladipo. What people really loved about Anthony Edwards as a prospect was like his effortless scoring, how athletic he just looked with the ball in his hands, the fact that he pretty much had an NBA-made body in college. Truly, the eye test of just watching him briefly would tell you the talent of a #1 pick was there. Some of his weaknesses, scouts did have concerns about his shot selection, which he did struggle with early in his NBA career, and how focused he actually was defensively. Also, and this is really the ironic funny part, they questioned this man's love for basketball. Now, looking at Ant-Man now, 4 years later, it's actually funny to see how he was viewed versus who he actually is as an NBA player. A lot of his strengths, they translated seamlessly. He's a great finisher at the rim. He's become a better progressing scorer throughout his first 4 years in the league. He's always had an NBA build, so he stays pretty durable. And he's passed up a lot of the stuff they looked at as weaknesses. I agree, his shot selection hasn't always been the best, but he's worked on it, especially in these last 2 years, and it's evident. In his first 2 years, 46% of his shots were three-pointers. Not saying he's a bad three-point shooter, but he can be a lot more effective going downhill a little bit more and not settling. In his last 2 years, including this one, 36% of his shots are threes, and he's making them at a much more efficient clip. Also, defensively, Minnesota has clearly bought all in on the defensive side of the ball. That's why they traded everything to get Rudy Gobert. That's why last deadline they probably moved on from D'Lo. And 2 of Minnesota's players from that 2020 draft have been pivotal pieces in the development of that side of the ball. Jaden McDaniels was also in that 2020 draft, and with his 6'9" frame and extremely long arms, he's become one of the most versatile on-ball defenders in the entire sport. And Ant-Man, he's completely embraced the defensive side, and at like 22 years old, he's one of the better two-way players in the entire league. Between the draft moves they made that night and some of the questionable looking trades they made at first, getting Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley, that team found their identity, which is why they are what they are today. Currently the best defense in the league and one of the best records in the competitive West. James Wiseman, he was the second pick in this draft, where the pick kind of looked like a no-brainer. Golden State desperately needed a big man, and he was easily the best big man prospect in this draft. James did have a pretty weird collegiate career, only playing like 3 games, and in the pros, he just hasn't been good. First of all, he got drafted into a win-now situation with a team not yet ready to hang up their dynasty, so he couldn't really make that many mistakes. His first year, he really didn't play that much, and he suffered a devastating knee injury that made him miss the following year. And then when he came back, Golden State was fresh off a championship. I'm not gonna lie, that is a ton of pressure for a 21-year-old coming off an injury, being forced to learn the Warriors way, where the standard is a championship. Also, and unfortunately for James, Golden State desperately needed him, where they were always pretty vulnerable and weak. Golden State never really had size, and he was plugged in and drafted to be that size. But James, he always seemed to me to have a very low IQ, a very low motor, terrible hands, and he just looked lost out there. He never really gelled with Golden State, and eventually he was moved for a very underwhelming package given where he was drafted. Now it's crazy to me because Golden State is always praised for how they built their empire and their dynasty. They drafted all their players. They drafted Steph, Clay, Draymond, etc. But this specific miss kind of feels like the start of the collapse of the dynasty. That down year they had when Steph broke his hand, and I believe they had the worst record in the whole league, that afforded them the second pick in the entire draft. And I don't blame them for who they picked because the fit felt obvious, but look at who they missed on. Obviously, it's 2020 hindsight, but they could have had the next generational point guard who I believe would have taken the baton and fit beautifully with how Golden State actually plays. For years, most of their championship years, they led the entire league in team assists. Most of their stars are low usage players that swing the ball and always find the best shot. Tyrese Halliburton embodies that to a T. He doesn't hold on to the ball long. He's a high assist player with low turnovers, which is great for them because they've always struggled with that. And he would have fit seamlessly with Steph, Clay, and Draymond. And he can shoot. Now, if you look at Indiana, they're first in team assists. Their players are low usage, and they now have Pascal Siakam. Even if you look back at that 2020 draft, Aaron Nesmith, he got drafted to Boston, where he kind of struggled a bit in his limited opportunities. He goes to Indiana, he joins Tyrese Halliburton's offense, and now he's a versatile two-way player that's averaging double figures on 50-40 splits. Obi Toppin was also in that exact same draft, and he went to New York and pretty much busted. Now, this year, he goes to Indiana and he's averaging a career high in points, rebounds, shooting 40% from deep, and he leads the league in 2-point percentage. Again, everybody that plays with this man gets significantly better, and to me, Golden State missing, and not just missing, but missing as badly as they did with the second pick in the draft. It was the start of the downfall of the dynasty. I know they got a championship in 2022, but after that, everything has kind of been going downhill. I find this draft also fascinating looking back on it because of Tyrese Maxey. When Tyrese got drafted, Philly already had Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid thriving. This was pre all the Ben Simmons BS stuff. Some of his biggest concerns out of Kentucky was how streaky and inefficient he actually was. And to me, it's funny because his career trajectory has gone so perfectly for Philly, and him being drafted there might have actually saved this franchise long term. Think about it. Maxey's first year there was Philly winning all those games, becoming the first seed, and eventually fizzling out with this infamous Ben Simmons play. Then the second year, Ben Simmons basically held out, which means Tyrese Maxey's opportunity became grand. His minutes more than doubled, and literally so did all of his numbers. He proved he can be a reliable ball handler, scorer, and contributor to a team that needed to fill that void. Then James Harden came, had great moments, but eventually did exactly what Ben Simmons did, holding out for a trade. Tyrese Maxey, he's been the one stepping up in the absence of Harden, now averaging 26 points and 7 assists, and him and Embiid, they're the highest scoring duo in the entire NBA. Now Philly, they've missed on ample first round picks during that quote unquote process, but imagine if they didn't hit on this specific pick, and this was a later first round pick. Also, Desmond Bane, he was another late first round pick that turned out to be a lifesaver for his franchise for a specific reason. Since Memphis kind of took off, the one thing to me holding them back has always been their perimeter shooting. Well, since he's been drafted, Desmond has been one of the deadliest snipers in the league and a steadily improving scorer all around. Also, some of the misfortunes in this draft, Killian Hayes, he never developed into what he was drafted to be. In fact, if you look at the player with by far the worst plus minus since this draft, I mean, it's not even close. Patrick Williams, some people did think he was overdrafted coming out, and he probably was, but him always being the third, fourth option for that Chicago team, to me hurt his development, and he is still a solid player. And this draft even has surprises and players that's still productive to balance out this draft, like Emmanuel Quickley now in Toronto, Devin Vassell in San Antonio, Sadiq Bey. Ultimately, some of the major hits and some of the major misses in this specific draft has had its impact on the upcoming teams, the bad teams, and the teams that were great that's unfortunately on the decline. If you guys like this video, please like this video. If you made it this far, comment your biggest surprise and disappointment in this one draft. Let me know in the comment section. Follow my social media sites, turn on post notifications, do all that great stuff, guys. And until next time, as always, stay tuned.